Hello everyone, thanks to AWS for having us today. My name is Mike Mahler, I'm from Slalom Consulting, and I run in the New York metro market our cloud enablement and security practice.
And I'm Glenn Thompson, I'm responsible for digital in the retirement space at T-Rowe, one of our larger divisions. I have to ask you a question before we start. You knew the answer to the trivia question that Frank asked in the beginning about the building that was fashioned after a punch card. You whispered it to me in the back.
I did.
And there was a free drink in the offing. I have never seen you turn down a free drink. Why did you not shout out the answer?
I thought it would be disqualified.
Well, apparently he's still getting his free drink, but I think it was because, Monolithic is not really Mike. No one thinks of him that way, but maybe we're afraid to be thought of as Paleolithic. I'm not sure. Anyway, let's get started.
And our session is over.
I don't know why they gave him the clicker. I'm at risk of being muted at a moment's notice. So we'll walk you through the problem statement at T-Rowe, what we were trying to accomplish, why we had to have targeted goals. That sounds patently obvious, but it was a big undertaking for us not to look at, we're going to digitize everything, we're going to cloudify everything, and it's going to be a nice infrastructure lift, and we'll get all the benefits of being at AWS. In a heartbeat. Our business partners, our product owner community, were not on board with this. They viewed it as tech infrastructure, kind of a let us know when you're done and Godspeed, and we'll go on with our lives. And we needed their involvement in a big way, so we had to really position it appropriately. So we'll go through it in that fashion. The background of this space, this is a B2B and a B2C space. Retirement outsourcing started in the 80s. It was get your benefits department, get them off your books, let somebody else run this for you. So it was an obvious cost play for businesses. In the 90s, it was really about fees and funds. T-Rowe did very well at that time. Our funds outperform most. Our fees are always historically very low. But today, every single one of the Fortune 1000 are with us or one of our competitors. So we're poaching business from others, and they're doing the same to us. So today, we win and lose based on service channels and digital assets. So it's the mobile app, the websites. These are the things that actually drive sales decisions. And when we talk about Monolith, we've got an infrastructure, like most financial services firms, that has a background record-keeping systems. We've got COBOL apps that could wear leisure suits to the office unironically. This stuff goes back decades and decades. It's really a big deal. So, all right, you may all think that this is a little on the money. It's the monolith. I have to tell you, this is really a good way for me to describe the problem. When we describe technical debt to our product owners, our business partners, they understand what we're saying about as well as I understood the movie 2001: Space Odyssey. They don't get it, and we don't do a good job of explaining to them what we're talking about. It is not just decommissioning apps. Nigel Faulkner, our CIO, joined the firm 4, maybe 5 years ago and started a big, laborious TCO program, but the outcome of this has been that we're now able to talk about these things with an ROI focus. We couldn't do that before. When we talked about decommissioning apps, you guys know what happens. You decommission the app, you haven't really achieved any hard dollar savings for the firm because all of the servers and the people are still there, and you're just allocating the money differently out to some other BU. So we're really talking about something that the business can project onto it whatever it wants. In the way I describe to people, what's happening in this movie? I tell my teenagers, well, project onto the monolith whatever you see there. Well, our business does this to us. They project onto it an endless tech-driven program that is going to be a money-sucking vacuum engine that was built by Sir Richard Dyson. So they're terrified of these kinds of programs. So it's important for us to educate them in terms of what we're doing. The retirement space is also has a very 2D model, and we're trying to move to 3D. And this picture was really not to try and explain that. I just found it terrifying, and I wanted you to share my discomfort. The next picture, I think, describes it a little better. That's how we treat our clients in the retirement space. It's really a two-dimensional view. This is ERISA, a regulated space. So the way the rules and the servicing channels grew up, we treat every new hire the same. We treat every 59-and-a-half-year-old the same, every 70-and-a-half-year-old the same. The magic numbers, it's really around age and employment status. So we've got to move to what does the individual really want to do, the way we do in our retail world. So the problem set really included not just legacy infrastructure like many of you have had to deal with. It includes a legacy app development mindset. And what I mean by that is when our business partner says, we need to do the following function. Here's something that's new, and this is what we're going to invest in. The very first thing they think of is, which application acts like that? Let's use that app. And which guy, developer, maintains that app? Who's the SME who can really help us with this? So not only do we have monolithic apps that are really difficult and unwieldy to maintain, we have people who are becoming monoliths unto themselves, and it's not good for their career development and puts the firm at risk. So we began this journey by restifying existing services on-prem, putting in an API broker so we could begin to piece this into production. When we thought about the program of modernizing and getting to cloud initially, it seemed like it was going to be a multi-year, and I don't mean 2 or 3, it seemed like it was going to be a decades-long program. And think about the technologies that didn't exist or you weren't aware of even 3 or 4 years ago. None of us heard of conversational user interface. None of us thought AI was a corporately applicable thing, and today they're becoming mainstream. So we can't really have a program that lingers on that long. And this is the digitization of T-Rowe's problem, kind of in a nutshell, in one slide. That's what the landing page, the public landing page, looked like for workplace retirement. That's the most used public site for our participants, the employees of the firms that are doing business with us. And what we found is people were clicking all over this Sesame Street looking street on all that real estate, thinking something was going to happen, like some Elmo was going to pop out like some furry version of Microsoft's Bob and give them assistance. It's just dead space. Like I said, today, when we lose in a finals presentation, they bring up our digital assets. They talk openly about fidelities, about M-Powers, and what's different. So we need to compete in that. And that's kind of why we brought Slalom on board.
Yep, and so I do have a speaking part.
Don't worry, it's short.
So that's the exciting part, pressing the buttons. So when you kind of consider the Monolith app and sort of the goals and objectives that T-Rowe has, the core goal is about personalization and segmentation. So how do they deliver the messaging, the features, the functionality that plan participants and their clients want to be able to benefit from, things that the current model and system didn't have, and how do we start to offer that? And the exercise kind of began with, all right, what are the opportunities that we're looking to deploy over a period of time? And what are the challenges that we're going to witness, both current state, short-term, and long-term, and how do we address that? And so when you kind of take a look at all the components of the application itself, it's how do you start to break it down and decouple it? So at its basic component, you need to have a reference architecture. So what are all the pieces, the products, the interfaces, who talks to what, when does it talk to this, how does it interface with that, and when do the users come on board, and what parts and features of the website and other things do they have access to? And then from there, you start to kind of understand what the true landscape is and sort of how are you going to tackle the problem. And what became obvious, given the goals of what we're trying to accomplish through personalization, the technology stack was just not going to work. Not wholeheartedly, but for the most part, it needed to change. Either it needed to address some little issues here, some big development challenges over there, some new products and services to introduce into the overall technology in order to achieve that end state. And then if you kind of take a look at like the horrible consulting term called a roadmap, you really needed a roadmap. And the roadmap was really an actionable plan to say, in the short term, in the long term, what are things that we can execute on to gain some incremental value in the short period of time so we see progress. And as a company and as a team, we're excited about where we're going and what we're doing. But then you also needed to understand what the bigger picture was, because like Glenn was saying, 3 years ago, AI wasn't sort of a big thing. 6 months from now, who knows what the next piece of technology is going to do to kind of set things on its head.
So we talked about the goals of the program. I'm glad Angie mentioned in the first session this morning around most people assuming that it's a pure cost play. Our business partners leapt to this conclusion. Well, it's infrastructure, so obviously we're going to pay less, so that's great, have at it. And we had to have a long discussion with them about this because we needed their buy-in and we needed their involvement. But we had to make them understand that there are other things that the cloud brings. Our technologists were ready. They were champing at the bit to get into this. We needed the business partners to understand that the real benefits here are the ability to deliver software quickly, the ability to scale in the cloud. I'm sure that none of you do this, but there are many people in this country who ignore their 401k accounts all year long, and then market drops 800 points, and they rush to our site to see what's going on and see if they can stem the losses. So we have difficulty keeping up with that. So there are some obvious benefits to being in the cloud, but there are real benefits that our business is trying to achieve, which is getting closer to CI/CD. We are not likely, T-Rowe is not a firm that's going to be pushing out hourly or daily releases on our financial transaction websites, but certainly weekly would make a lot of sense, and certainly content changes on a regular basis. We do a thing called Smart Video, which is a little cartoon thing we partner with a third party to do that brings in your personal information and does a little animation for you to help people really think through what it is they're trying to achieve in their goals. Getting those things out and getting those things updated fairly quickly drives traffic to the site, so it really helps us. So I talked about elastic computing already. The pay-as-you-go infrastructure. So, you know, our partners in our infrastructure groups are great partners. They know their space inside and out. They do a lot for us. They also give the app dev community somebody to make fun of because, you know, infrastructure guys. So there's a lot of benefits that come with them. But if you think about how these groups have grown up over 4 decades, you know, I'm put in mind of Oscar Wilde's quote, "The bureaucracy is expanding to meet the needs of the expanding bureaucracy." There's no end to this, and there's no way to achieve the costs of. I decommissioned a system that had 100,000 lines of code, and I achieved no hard dollar savings for the firm because all of the hardware that it's running on, are still there, and the people who are supporting it are still there. In the cloud, obviously not. So this is a really important piece for us. The transparency in run costs, so the business understands down to this is the cycle, this is the thing you're paying for when they make investment business decisions. They're usually made based on the investment dollars and the time to market and what Slalom charges us and those kinds of things, as opposed to what the BAU costs. And then the risk reduction. We spend, it's not an even number across the firm, but our TCO initiative told us in some of the applications we spend upwards of 5% of our tech budget keeping the operating systems, the databases current and making sure they're secure. This is table stakes. We used to do a tech session at the end of a final series. So we knew it was us against one of our competitors. There'd be a 1-hour session at the end where we would talk about technology. It'd be me or somebody like me who would go in there and talk about InfoSec and data privacy and the technology and why it's important, and they would check the box. In a post-Equifax world, those conversations happen right up front. The very first day, they want to talk about their employees' data. Are we using social security numbers as a key? Are we masking data, obfuscating data in the test? They want to have those conversations right up front. So being in the cloud gives us the ability to add features and manage that in a much more reduced risk way. Here are the really killer points, though, that we felt drove our business partners to say, yeah, we get it, this is really important. A move from a capital model to a consumption model. At T. Rowe and a couple of other financial services firms I've been at, we spend 6 months evaluating packages, we partner with our architecture guys, we pick a package, then we spend another 6 months negotiating a contract. We put it on the books, it's an enterprise license agreement, it's a perpetual license agreement, we have it forever. 6 months after deploying it, somebody on the business community will say, did we pick the wrong package? And then the finance guys go apoplectic because they say, you can't have an impaired asset, we're still advertising this thing. This is crazy, this is madness that we did this. We want to be able to fail fast. We want to be able to get out there, try some things and say, didn't meet the need, not what we want. And we've wasted hundreds or single-digit thousands of dollars testing stuff out, not 6 months of the highest priced guys in our portfolio's time. And I refer to this as digital diabetes. Think about the food pyramid and how we grew up with low fat, and you have a piece of prime rib and somebody will make a cholesterol joke sitting at the table, and now we look back and we realize, oh, we were wrong. It's all sugar and starches, and that's how we killed ourselves and why we have a national obesity crisis. We did the same thing with technology. We put all these assets on the balance sheet. We said we got to have an enterprise license agreement. I was at Merrill Lynch for 11 years. We had 7 different database licenses for every employee of the company, including Stan O'Neill, the CEO. This was madness. We didn't need this. We put a bloated set of portfolio items in front of ourselves and then wondered why we couldn't control it. We need to have a way to get off of digital diabetes, and really the migration to cloud is that inflection point. If you just looked internally and said, hey, we're going to do this differently and have a different model, you wouldn't achieve it. But a migration to cloud gives you the opportunity to do that. And of course it brings better ones and zeros, don't you agree?
I do.
This is a personal peeve, I apologize. Digital, I'm in charge of digital. We've been digital since before our COBOL apps were suiting up to go to the disco. The whole thing is digital. I apologize for this burdensome thing.
So can you imagine, if you close your eyes, could you imagine the conversations we have in status meetings? Stand up 10 minutes and 40 minutes later, still talking. So the important part is coming in. You get to, as a consultant or a consulting company, you get to come in and kind of ingest a little bit of what's happening, and then you're going to say, hey, we see other customers do it this way and that way. And I think what's important is there's a lot of similarities between what T. Rowe is doing and any other company, whether they're in that industry, in financial services or other. And for our approach, and from an architecture point of view, we started with the data discussion. So we understand that with personalization being the goal, right, it's all about the data. But from a data perspective within Tibro, we're like, okay, we could figure that one out. We could figure out how to get the data up into the cloud. We could sync it. We could kind of pull some stuff out and inject it into the cloud in different ways. So that problem we could solve pretty easily in the short term. But from a personalization point of view, and going back to how you decouple the application, there were true functionality and products and service issues that we had to deal with in order to start providing some incremental value, not just to within Tibro themselves, but to the customers and the plan participants that are all part of the Tibro portfolio. So our approach, no different than others, was to figure out, all right, what are the things that we're going to help to get some quick hits, long-term vision, how we're going to address these problems, and kind of lay it, all correlate it back to the plan. And I think, at least from our perspective of working with different customers, Tibro no different, is the one thing that they do have in common, or that everybody should have in common, it's about getting the foundation correct and laying out that foundation. So whether you're building a home or building a car, everything, if it's built on a solid foundation, all good things start to happen from there. And I think that was the starting point in how we started addressing the problem.
Your cars are on foundations? No wonder you're late to every meeting.
My car's in the shop right now.
Touche. So the approach we took, our business partners viewed this as putting a new roof on a house. They understood that at some point they had to do it. They understood the longer they waited, the more it would cost. But in the end, the only thing you have is the same house with a new roof. It's a very unsexy financial investment in technology. So we wanted them to get something important out of this. And what we wanted them to get was the DevOps toolchain, our ability to get closer to CI/CD. We had been talking about it for years. We were already using good tools as we were thinking about building a new in the cloud, but we're using the migration project to really invest in that toolchain. So we're calling it internally, we call it Unity, but you would recognize all the tools that are behind it, and our ability to say, this is the type of environment, the type of performance I need, and then we can automatically build the Terraform scripts behind it to gin up the environments we need. We are also trying to use that investment to build up test automation so that this migration, by the way, is happening in parallel with functional enhancements to these existing websites. When we do those code merges, to do that regression test, obviously we have to keep that window as short as possible, but we need a really robust regression test. So we're building out test automation for headless services as well as test automation in Selenium for the web pages. So in the transitional state, what we're really trying to do here are identify the things that we need, as Mike said, build the correct architectural foundation so that it's architecturally sound, but don't try to rewrite a monolithic service like retirement enterprise middleware, which you could guess has been around for quite a long time, and the original people who wrote it are no longer with Tibro. Rather than try to make that a monolithic rewrite, pick out the services you need to expose the things you need running in the cloud and build those out. Use the API broker to come back, access data on-prem, make sure that that's performant. We have a pretty sizable pipe between us and AWS. We also have some caching mechanisms using Redis built in to help us with performance there.
Yeah, exactly, and you're only seeing a small part of the picture, right? So I think we have sort of a Jumbotron. It kind of puts the whole retirement kind of application together. But the key, if you're looking at this, right, there's definitely some lift and shift, right? Things that we know we could get to the cloud, we could address that later, decouple that at a later date, but it wasn't going to impact performance. It may not have been the most mission critical part of the service, but it allows us to get some of the quick hits, show some early value in kind of our journey to the cloud. Others were doing some things on premise and in the cloud at the same time, whether that was refactoring some parts of the app, rewriting some services, like Glenn was saying, restify some things. So as we start to leverage more microservice technology, which was also part of the technical goal, is how do we pave the way to start integrating with some of those services.
You didn't say Jumbotron in rehearsal. Is it because you're looking at me sideways? I did salads for 3 days, man.
This is not rehearsed, by the way. This is all ad hoc.
No, that's all scripted, I promise you. So go ahead. So in the final state, the idea is to have a service like REM decomposed into microservices. So based on specific business functions, where we can, we have journey teams that are building out end-to-end. This is what the consumer is thinking, what's driving them to ask Tibro for a loan or to change their status. Those are the things that Slalom is helping us out with. Where we can, the journey teams are building those anew, and they're building those native in-cloud using microservices. And then where we need to migrate the rest, we're decomposing those as the services and the pages become available. Ultimately, it will all be in microservices with an Aurora-based ODS running in the cloud in the back end. And one of the things we had to do with data, the way we classified data was very tech-focused. It had a security lens on it, of course. It had a performance lens, which tiers the data need to be in, which applications are accessing it online. We didn't really think of it as much as we needed to in terms of the business domains. So as Mike said, we're looking for just-in-time data, the things that we need to access. So Adobe Analytics data, multi-channel or 360-channel view of what the participants' activities are. We recently implemented Amazon Connect and integration with an AI engine on the back end. So we're doing the first conversational user interfaces. We need to know what activities are happening there before somebody gets into a chat window on the website or gets connected with one of our call center agents. So building that data out in the proper domains as we go. And then I would love to show you the new workplace that Slalom has helped us build. It's not been released yet. It's going to be announced at the sponsor forum in May. So if you're already a T-Row retirement customer, you'll see it there, or you can get it from one of your colleagues. And if not, maybe you could convert into T-Row from whatever company you're with now. Or you could get
shameless plug.
Well, you could get Mike to get you a job at Slalom. Actually, Mike could use the employee referral fees, really.
Okay, so it all comes down to personalization, right? So this and the next few slides are sort of money slides, right? And so T-Row, aside from going all into the cloud, they also invested in a lot of products, or had investments in products that they were upgrading around the Adobe Marketing Cloud. And the key around personalization is similar to decoupling the Monolithic app and figuring out how to break that apart and get it into the cloud piece by piece, or rebuild, refactor, or just lift and shift. This exercise was sort of the opposite, right? It was sort of a recoupling event. And so we knew what products that we needed to deploy, or certainly invest into. And from how we mapped out the business value and the outcomes that we're looking to achieve, both short-term and long-term, as we start to deliver what the new website and what the new T-Row site would look like, it was about how to incrementally add some of that value along the way. And as opposed to going more big bang and saying we're going to have one big major release, it's all about small incremental MVPs, and over time start adding some of that value. And the key to that was, if you think about going to the cloud, it's kind of a very disruptive event, not necessarily in a bad way, but it changes the culture, right? There's definitely a cultural shift, when you're moving from what you historically have done on-premise into the cloud. There's new skills, there's new ways of operating, there's new ways of how do I govern this. Most of the time, the employee base at the customer is not really changing when you go to the cloud. You might be retooling it. So for some period of time, you're doing twice the work. So if we were to deploy too quickly, it's just from a governance point of view, a cultural, the skills gap, we just couldn't keep up, and we couldn't address that quickly. So it's all about laying that plan out again of how we're going to start to implement and deploy. And then from T-Row's perspective, within the Adobe Marketing Cloud itself, they were a beta user of Audience Manager, and then within the organization for retirement, they were the first users of Launch. So it was a big event for them and a lot of change, and it was positive disruption, but it was disruption nonetheless that they had to get a handle on.
Agreed. So we focus on the output and business value. I hate to disagree with people who are smarter than I. Nitin in an earlier session said it's about the journey, not the destination. We had to turn that around. We had to make it about the destination, because we needed to have tangible, achievable goals, something that we could chunk down. We started to look at a 3 or 4 year time horizon. It was hard for us to get our heads around that. Our business partners couldn't line that up with their publicly facing functionality roadmap. Remember, this is a B2B business. Every single one of our clients goes to RFP every 3 years, whether they're happy with us or not. And Fidelity, Empower, all the other big guys out there are trying to poach business from us while we're doing the same to them. So we really needed to focus on a lift and reshape approach. The idea was do the minimum to the apps we needed to do to get them into the cloud, get into the ecosystem so we can start to get those benefits. And then as we were touching them with journey work, really refashion them there. But we needed to be in the cloud to get the scalability, but also to get really the right segmentation of the clients. As Mike described, we can only achieve that running in the cloud. So here are some examples of what they look like. I don't know, Jennifer Nobles said it doesn't sound like somebody who has money issues to me, but what we're trying to achieve here are people who hadn't thought about retirement savings at all. Well, we've got KYC practices in our firm on the retail side. We don't apply those in the retirement space, and we should. We need to be thinking about what are people's goals, what are their risk tolerances, what's their level of awareness. So if we look at an example like Brendan Hanshaw, we've got a word up there that says, definitely behind where you should be. We're trying to talk about peer comparisons. So by having a larger data set, by being able to look at third-party data sets along with our own activity and our analytics data, we can tell people, you may be achieving something against your own financial goals, but that's hard for people to understand. Maybe the goal is in question for them. We have a confidence number. We tell people, you're 74% likely to achieve your financial goal at retirement. Well, is 74 a good goal? It sounds like I'm 3/4 of the way there, but if I was in school, would that be a C or a D? So it's confusing to people. If we can tell people, here's where your peers are, it's a really important benchmark. We also refer to this in the retirement industry as benefit shaming, so it's very effective. Mr. Roach here, so let's assume his name is an acronym. We need to get this guy off of cannabis investing chat rooms and onto cannabis consumption rooms, because we need him to know that T-Rowe is going to work with him through retirement. What are the company's goals as it relates to their employees and 401ks? It's to get them off their balance sheet, but to get them off comfortably financially, so that they've been with the company for a period of time, they've saved a lot of money, they've really achieved something out of those benefits, and then when they're at the end of their careers, they're not hanging around too long past their use-by date. So we need them off in a really good fashion. Goldie really indicates here she's got some aversion to gamification strategies we put up. So we need to recognize that some of the really interesting, clever things we do for certain generations don't work for others. And if we look at Alan Anderson, we need to take into account that people have financial goals other than retirement. If you've seen the Fidelity commercials, there's some cool grandparents who buy a speedboat and they take their grandkids out on it. I don't know about you guys, but my grandparents never got beyond the gravy boat. But these people really had financial goals that were important to them well into their 50s, maybe early 60s, but really weren't retirement goals. So we need to take all that into account, and this segmentation strategy helps us get there.
Yep. So a couple more things, no more joking around. I think we have 2 minutes, so we got this serious. So if you put all those 5 slides, and that's just a sample, right? And you kind of visualize there's almost an infinite amount of content variations, right? So putting it all together, again, the goal is personalization, right? So you can't solve it all right away, and over time you got to adjust. And so it's all about storyboarding out, when somebody goes out to the site, what are they looking to do? What are they looking to click on? What are they looking to learn? Where are they putting their money? Where are they taking it out? If they're taking it out. And then from there, you start to build in the user stories, the use cases, and you start to now have a nice framework around what kinds of personas that you're looking to build upon. And so the key to this is not to come up with all of the personas, because it'll just take too long to do, but it's about building enough of them and designing the solution around it and being flexible with it so that you could guide your customers to the personas that you define. And so from T-Rowe's point of view, that's how we address personalization.
We have 40 seconds for punchlines. Here are the punchlines.
I didn't press the button, sorry, 35 seconds.
Be clear in the definition of technical debt. I think I beat that one to death early. Don't publish a list of learnings while the lesson is still going on. There are myths. Don't perpetuate myths. There's a myth that Google could predict better than the CDC flu outbreaks, right? Everybody bought into that early. We found out later it wasn't true. I started a myth that Mike is going to make a killing on employee return to referral funds just by appearing here with me. Not true. Beware the technical purists, for they are unclean. We've got architects who are brilliant, who are wonderful people, and everything they see they call technical debt. Make sure they're making the same trade-off decisions that you're making, and most importantly, measure what you value rather than valuing what is easy to measure. Beware the PMO. No offense to the PMO folks in the room, but it's the dates and the dollars. Those are data points. Those are not goals. And I have that dream big and to dare fail hanging in my office. I think that that's a good one. But this one I have hanging around my neck. The bigger your app becomes, the greater probability. It's only me will be on a 4-week trip to Antarctica when it fails. And you're all laughing, but you'll get those calls from Antarctica from time to time. And we have no time for Q&A, so we did that perfectly. Thanks, appreciate your attention, folks.